Welcome to your next great novel. I'm your host, Phil Williams, and today's guest is thriller author Brett Battles. He is the USA Today best-selling author of over 30 novels, including the Jonathan Quinn series, the Project Eden series, and the time-bending Rewinder trilogy. His debut novel, The Cleaner, was nominated for the 2008 Barry Award for Best Thriller and the 2008 Shamus Award for Best First Novel. His second novel, The Deceived, won the 2009 Barry Award for Best Thriller. He received an additional Barry Award nomination for the fourth in his Quinn series, The Silenced. Welcome to the show, Brett.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. I appreciate you being here. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you became an author?
Uh, sure. I'm not sure exactly how I became an author, but I
Okay.
do know that it it was something that I decided I was going to be way back when I was a kid. I have a very distinct memory of being in, I believe it was fifth grade, so that would put me around 10 years old, maybe 11, when I started telling people that I was going to be an author because I wanted to write books because I just loved stories. I remember specifically in that fifth grade class, my teacher, Miss Thurm, every day after lunch would read to us for a half hour. I think sometimes it was Hardy Boys and it was all sorts of different things. And and I just fell in love with story and being able to tell story. And so my whole life has been geared in my head to think that I would be an author someday.
Right.
Now, it took me a while. I did write, a lot in my teen years, not good stuff, of course, because no one knows how to write at that age, almost no one. And then some in my 20s, and there were years when I didn't, and life and career got in the way, but I kept it in mind, and I finally just hunkered down. Um, I think I was like when I was it was right after I turned 40, actually. I just hunkered down and said, if I'm not going to make this happen now, I'm never going to be able to make this happen. And I wrote like four novels at that point. Um, and this was back before self-publishing and everything really had a hold. This was in the early 2000s. And so my only avenue really was to go for a traditionally published deal. Um, the first two of those novels didn't sell. The third one was out and wasn't really getting a lot of traction. So I wrote the fourth one, but as the fourth one was finishing, I sold the third one, which happened to be The Cleaner, which is the first book in my Quinn series. So I kept at it and kept at it. And then finally in 2008, I was able to go full time writing. And I've basically been now full time writing almost 11 years with some ups and downs in there, and then switching to independent from being traditional. But it's been an interesting road, and I have been able to keep away from having a traditional desk job, which is definitely my focus.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, did you buy your rights back from the books that you started
uh,
with?
I
Have
wish. I wish. It's unfortunately they're at Random House, and um, and every time I talk to my agent about it, it's like there's no way they're going to let go of this stuff, um,
Wow.
and because they're still selling, you
Right.
know, and
It probably
partly,
helps all those stuff that you do.
yeah,
Right.
I've continued the series afterwards because it is my most popular series. I would love nothing more than to have the series back. But I just don't, because for promotional benefits, if nothing else, because it's the first four books in the series. And but I just don't know when that day was coming. If I did, it would have to be a huge check, I'm sure, to get it
Right.
back. I mean,
Right.
maybe not huge to some people, but a lot more than I'm able to make to do at this point. Maybe I'll win the lottery someday, and I can do it then.
Right. Well, one good thing is that your books are battle tested. I mean, most
That's true.
people, right? I mean, most people that are writing, even myself, I've never been traditionally published, so
Right.
it's like you think you're good, you hope maybe, but you
Right.
don't. You
Well,
know, you,
I mean, I definitely do not discount the fact that I benefited from that traditional experience. I had five books come out from Random House before I went independent, and I went independent in like 2011. So it's like really early when the new wave of self-publishing came into existence. But that traditional start, uh, gave me a lot of education as far as editing and what how to tell a good story, and it also just gave me a lot of focus of what I wanted and what I needed to do. So it was, and on top of that, it did build me a small but significant audience too. That I brought many of those still with me as I moved forward, and so that I think helped me get a jump start when I actually did go independent. But I think the majority of my readers now are people I've gained since I've been on my own, as opposed to with the traditional publisher. But without them, it would have been a much harder road to hoe there.
Right, right. I really think that the independent publishing industry, like if you're an independent author like we are, that the first 1,000 readers are harder to get than the first 5,000, and the first
Absolutely.
5,000 are harder to get than the first or than the next 50,000, in my opinion. If you're writing good books and you're building the system to make it work, it becomes easier to scale up. And I think it's
Yeah.
the big problem is really getting your name out there in the beginning.
Absolutely, absolutely. And more you have out there is also a huge benefit.
Right.
Now,
Absolutely.
as long as it's good stuff. I mean, good quality stuff out there is very important too.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem too, and it's something that I've always been concerned about. It's like, okay, it doesn't matter how. I mean, I want to write more books, but if one of them's bad and the person happened to pick up the one that's not good, now granted,
Right.
this is all subjective, good or bad,
Yeah.
but they pick up the one that's objectively not very good,
Right.
then they're not going to read anything else that I write,
Right.
and
Well, I mean,
essentially,
the key there is not to write, something bad, or
right, right,
but to, I mean, if and I'm sure with your stuff too, you have a certain quality that you would like to upkeep, and if you know something isn't working, you will not put it out right away. For instance, I had a book that I wrote called Mine. It's a kind of a coming of age science fiction.
yes, I know that book. It was in one of our promotions.
Yes, exactly, it was, and it's one of my favorite books. But when I first finished that book and I gave it to my editor, I mean, she didn't have it but a week or two before she started asking me some questions, um, and which were actually kind of making me. I mean, they hit home because when I gave it to her, I knew deep down that the book wasn't ready and that it needed some work.
Right.
But I had a schedule to keep and everything. But I stopped myself and I took a second look and I said, okay, we're not going to do this one now. I mean, it created this big hole in my schedule, but I couldn't put it out as it was. And so I set it to the side and I wrote another book. And after I finished that other book, I picked up Mine again and I did this complete rewrite of the whole thing. And and I was so much happier with it at that point. And my editor loved it at that point. So we put it out then. But if I had put it out earlier, it would have been the quality would have sucked. But I knew it, and I couldn't let that happen. And
Right.
I think that's what we need to do is independence is even if we're trying to keep to a schedule, if something sucks, you can't put it out there because it's your reputation. It's going to last a lot longer than those couple of months that you've screwed up your schedule.
Right. Right. Well, I'm working on a series right now, and I did the math calculating the speed that I'm writing this thing, and it's pretty long,
Right.
but I've calculated roughly 2 years to finish. So, which is scary to me because normally, I'm putting out,
that
at least three books a year, and
right. That's 2 years for the whole series or for one book?
for the whole series to be
Oh, okay.
finished.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not bad.
Yeah. But
I
it's,
I tried to do. I mean, I'm mostly series, but I'll do. I'm always putting out a Quinn book every year, and then I'll have one of my other series that I'm putting out a book on, or two of them, and then I might have a slot because I try to do about 3 books a year. And then my third one will either be another series or it'll be some fun project that I really want to do. So
Yeah, I don't know. You've got a similar schedule to me. I don't know how people can write. I know authors that write 8 or 9 books a year, and I couldn't do that. I
well,
mean,
I have a feeling that a lot of those books are probably 40,000 words too.
right,
They're
right.
they're half the length of a book that you probably write or myself. Ironically, the book I'm writing right now is a new Quinn book, which will be out in July, but it's on the shorter end. It's going to be a 50 to 60,000 word, which is a lot shorter than a typical Quinn book. But it's taking me even longer than it usually takes to write a typical Quinn book because I'm trying to figure it out and I'm not used to writing at that speed. And I had some problems at the beginning, but now it's all coming together. But yeah, I'd love to write a lot more books a year too. But even if I did them short, apparently it doesn't save me any time.
Right. Right. So one thing I was reading about on your bio, you were talking about some of the places that you've visited, and I thought that was fascinating. Now, or is this just travel for pleasure, and it just happens to?
Well, I think some of the earlier places I've been have definitely just been for pleasure, but then I've used that later in books. Now I'm all anytime I travel, it's always dual purpose. It's always for pleasure because I love to travel, and I'll choose places that I want to go. But I'm always there with an eye of can I use this for something or how am I going to use this or might specifically already have something in mind that I want to set in a particular place. For instance, this summer in July, my daughters and I are going to Japan for a few weeks, and I've never been to Japan, so I'm very excited about this trip. But I am 100% certain Japan will be showing up in a book within the next 12 to 18 months, if not 2 books. So because I'll be on the lookout there, and I'll be just I'll be taking lots of pictures and lots of notes and remembering situations and because I think it's always interesting and exciting for me to set stories in places that are not where I'm from.
Right.
Although I do also enjoy that, but it makes it more exciting for the writing and sometimes more exciting reading too.
Yeah, they have an interesting culture.
Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely very different.
yeah.
One of the statistics I saw recently about Japan I thought was just fascinating is they actually sell more adult diapers than baby diapers, which which is crazy if you think about the demographics. But I guess they're having trouble with like the
Yeah,
young people.
that's it. They're aging out. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
I do remember reading stuff I think about I'm just trying to bring some people in just to take care of certain jobs and everything. But I can't. I mean, I don't know if that's 100% accurate. So no one, please don't quote me.
right. So, what's your latest book and book series?
Well, the latest one that came out is a book called Nightman, which is the first book of a new series, but it's the features a gentleman named Nate who is the used to be Quinn's apprentice in my Quinn series and has become Quinn's partner. So he's been in pretty much every Quinn book, and now he has got his own series. But I've set it up in a way that his series are the personal jobs that he does um, on his own in between his missions with Quinn. So he'll still be in the Quinn books, but these are where the Quinn's books are international spy thrillers. Nate's books, the Nightman books, are more domestic crime vigilante
Okay,
situations. He's basically helps people who can't help themselves,
right,
and he's driven to do it I have to be very careful here because you'll learn about it in the first book, but there's
right,
a reason behind it, and it in a way it's kind of like a higher power calling him to it, but it's not really the higher power that what we would think. There
right.
is something that is urging him to do these things that he can't really say no to,
Gotcha.
um, which is great. And all the books are told in first person, so it's him telling you about what he's doing. So it's very personal, and you're right there with him. And I really, really, really enjoy enjoyed writing the first one. I can't wait to get into writing the second one, which will happen later in the year. So
I'll have to
there's that.
check that out. I'm a fan of vigilante justice novels.
Yeah.
I actually write a lot of my novels are would
Oh, good.
classify in the vigilante
Yeah.
justice
Yeah.
side. But
Yeah. And he, he's got the thing about Nate is he's got a ton of skills that most of your regular, even just regular vigilantes might not necessarily have because he's been working in the espionage world for, almost a decade. And, uh, and he's got access to equipment and sources and people that most people don't have access to, which is great, But he's still, out there kind of doing this on his own because he doesn't want anybody else to get hurt by what he's doing. So, that makes it an interesting twist. Plus, he's out there trying to deal with these problems, but as much as possible, he's not he's not a vigilante. He's not Charles Bronson. He's going to go in there blazing with his shotgun and
right.
or Magnum or whatever. He's going to try to take care of the problem in ways that, he's not necessarily going to do any damage, but damage will get done.
Right. I think it's interesting if you have a character that is limited
Mm-hmm.
physically, like they can't just overpower anybody or be able to do these superhuman feats, and then you kind of, as a writer, you sort of have to think about how would they handle this situation creatively, as opposed to
Absolutely.
just using the brute force of
Absolutely. Well,
cracking skulls.
one of Nate's handicaps is, and this is a handicap he has in the Quinn books too. In the second Quinn book, and I'm kind of giving something away here, but in the Deceive, the second Quinn book, he loses the lower half of his right leg. So he's only got 1.5 legs. So, but he's very good on his prosthetics. So you wouldn't necessarily know this, but it does. He does have a actual physical limitation.
Did you bring an excerpt from Nightman, or did you bring one from something else?
I actually have the excerpt from Nightman. I
Great,
thought I'd read to you.
great.
Uh, and as a thriller writer, it's really hard to read an excerpt from a book because I always, whenever I'm asked to do that, I never, I'm a little bit at first like paralyzed because I don't want to read anything that's going to give anything away.
Right.
So what I end up doing and what I'm going to do now is I usually read from the very beginning of the book because that all that does is set you up like you would be set up anyway.
Yep.
So I would be happy to read from chapter 1 of Nightman if you'd like.
Fantastic. Let's hear it.
All right, chapter 1. Here they come. They're in a gray Honda Accord. It's not the same car they used last time, but it's the kind of vehicle they favor. Ubiquitous, bland, and very blend into the scenery-esque. I'm watching it on the feed from the camera I've set up to cover the street. I've been waiting for over 2 hours in case they showed up early. They haven't. Like clockwork, they're right on time. I click the button on my laptop that shrinks the feed into one of 4 squares, and the other 3 squares are views from my other cameras, one inside the store, one outside covering the store front, and one focused on the back alley. On the inside view, I can see the owner, Mr. Park, sitting on his stool and ringing up a customer while keeping an eye on his TV. I'm not familiar with Korean TV shows, so I don't know what he's watching. Appears to be some kind of period drama. There are 2 other customers, a pair of teenage girls hunting for drinks in the coolers at the back. I will them to hurry up. Not that I'm expecting problems, but the fewer people around, the better. As expected, the Accord turns into the alley. It's taken me nearly 2 weeks to figure out their pattern. I thought I had it worked out twice before, but both times they failed to show up. After going back over everything I knew, I realized where I'd made my mistakes. Their arrival today is the validation of that correction. As the vehicle slows, my gaze moves to the feed showing the front of the store. The camera is across the street, giving me a wide shot that spans several units on either side of Park's Mini-Mart. Entering the frame on the right is the guy I've come to call Waste of Life number 1. He's Caucasian, skinny, about 5'7", with close-cropped brown hair and ears that lie flat against his head. Today he's dressed in slacks, a dress shirt, and a jacket. No tie, but he doesn't need it. The outfit is enough to make him appear disarming. WOL number one walks down the sidewalk, talking on his phone. I don't need a camera inside the Accord to know he's speaking with someone in the vehicle. His expression is jovial, as if he's talking to a friend about plans for the evening. He pauses before he reaches the mini-mart, like the conversation needs his full attention. On the alley cam, the Accord stops behind Mr. Park's place. 3 WOL passengers get out. Only the driver remains inside. Today, they're wearing clown masks, which seem fitting. If everything were to play out like the gang's previous jobs, WOL number one would enter the market, sneak into the back to unlock the rear door, then return to the front and nonchalantly shove a rubber doorstop under the front door to keep it from opening. At about the same time as this last bit, his buddies would slip in through the back entrance. After that, he and his asshole friends would take all the money from Mr. Park's cash register and make him open the safe. Though they don't know it, things are going to play out a little differently today. I check inside the store. The 2 girls are still trying to decide what they want, which means they won't be leaving in time and I will need to be extra careful. I close my computer and open the door. I've been hiding inside an empty store 2 units away from the mini-mart. It's a considerably more pleasant stakeout location than the dumpster I used on one of my failed attempts. When I step into the alley, I'm about a car's length behind the Accord, right in the sight line of the trio moving toward Mr. Park's door. Afternoon, I say, as I move my hands behind my back. Nice masks. I'm wearing one too. Only mine's a black ski mask with holes for my eyes and mouth. This confuses them. One of them starts to say something, but before he can get a whole word out, I whip my hands in front of me and pull the triggers of the 2 taser guns I'm holding. Sets of wires fly, hitting 2 of the 3 men and dropping them to the ground, where they writhe like frying bacon. These tasers of mine aren't your off-the-shelf everyday kind of electric shock weapon. They're especially made and have detachable cartridges connected to the wires that keep the charges flowing. I drop one of the guns, pop the cartridge out of the other, and replace it with a new set of wires. By the time I'm through, the 3rd guy has realized that things are going sideways and is running away from me, but he hasn't gone far enough. The needle-like pins hit him in the back, and he crashes to the asphalt. From my first shot to my last, fewer than 5 seconds have passed, just enough time for the driver to panic. Before he can put the car into drive, I yank open the rear door and toss in a smoke bomb. As I shut the door, he punches the gas and makes it maybe 50 feet before the bomb goes off. The device is designed to fill a good-sized room with smoke. In the Accord, the smoke is thick and opaque. The driver is smart enough to slam on the brakes before he hits anything, but now he's faced with one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations. He can stay in the car and hope he doesn't choke to death, or he can get out where he'll have to deal with me. He chooses option 2, probably the smarter decision, but I'm sure that's not what he's thinking when I hit him with the taser darts the second he steps out. I'll stop there. How about that?
Yeah, that was fantastic. I
Hey.
definitely had. I like the writhing like the bacon. I definitely was picturing that in my mind.
Good. That's perfect.
Yeah, the smoke bomb. That was. I was trying to figure out how he was going to do that. That was really good.
Well, that's always the fun, isn't it? Is putting in a difficult
Yeah.
situation, figuring out how they're going to take care of it,
Right.
especially since they're probably, your hero should be, or well, likely is smarter than the writer, you or me,
Right.
and so they would have easily planned this stuff out. And we have to just kind of go, now, what would they do?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing that the fact that everything is non-lethal.
Right.
It gives it's not near as exciting to me if he went in and just blasted the 3 guys.
Right. And then he would also be, in this case, he would be using excessive force in compared to the crimes aren't great, and they've done some bad things, but they haven't killed anybody either.
Right.
So,
Right.
but he's going to be faced with other situations that are a lot worse than that. But still, when he can, he'll set things up so that the normal course of law and order can eventually be imposed. But he's giving it a helping hand.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was fantastic. That's great.
Thank
Definitely, I'll have to check that book out. I think you've had tremendous successes as an author. I mean, it's winning the Barry Award. Granted, you've been writing forever, so it's not like you're an overnight success. Everybody thinks that people are overnight successes, but what,
I don't even know if I'm a success yet.
right.
I'm a middling success at best. So
To a lot of us, though, I mean, I would love to win an award like that. That's fantastic.
yeah, I was very and surprised. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So I'm just curious, what would be your biggest failure as an author, you think?
Biggest failure. I mean, it would depend on when you ask me that question.
Right.
I think when I parted ways with Random House, that felt like a big failure. But part of that was because of the big changes happening in publishing at the time, and my editor and the people who had been my champions at Bantam Dell, which was the imprint I was at, had all been let go or had moved on to somewhere else by the time I got let go. So I was let go by people who had no interest in me,
Right.
uh, but that felt like I mean that was a very there were several months there where I was really just panicking because I would that was in 2010, so I had only been full time writing for like 2 years, and now all of a sudden I don't have a contract, I don't have anything, and I desperately never wanted to go back to a day job, because not that there's anything wrong with it, but my talent, the thing I'm good at, and I'm not saying that I'm good at this thing, but it's the skill I have that is my best skill is writing, and where that stacks up on the skills of everybody else's ability to write is a whole different thing. But it's my best skill, and I want to keep doing that, and it also makes me happy.
Right.
So I didn't want to go back to a day job, but it was there were some panic months, and that's when I made that transition into going independent because I wasn't sure. Do I just try to get on to another publisher? But if I did that, they would probably give me a smaller advance than I got the last time because I got let go by these people, and
Right.
they probably wouldn't continue the Quinn series. And so I kind of did a 2-track thing with my agent where we tried to get, where we were going to try to send a book out, and at the same time I was also, because I write fast, I was writing 2 books, and one we were going to send out, and the other I was going to try to self-publish and see how that went. And I ended up self-publishing both of them, and then the rest was basically history. So
Of course, back then,
yeah.
self-publishing wasn't as
it was
there weren't that many people that were
it
doing
was
it
yeah,
well.
starting out. I mean, Joe Conrath and Blake Crouch were doing it, and Barry Eisler had just started doing it a little bit. So some big names and people who I knew, and I could talk to them, and they were encouraging, and it was just starting to. I think it was I don't know exactly, somewhere around 2009 or
Yep.
so when Amazon opened it up to everybody. And so I jumped in 2011, in the spring of 2011, and so some people had been doing it, but it was still really new at the time. So it was scary, but
Right.
um, month after month, I could see. I mean, I wasn't necessarily making enough right away, but I could see the potential there, and I knew that if things kept going like that, there was going to come a month in that fall when it would be a tipping point, and things would be okay after that. And if I could just make it to that month, which I barely did, I remember thinking that I'm not sure how I'm going to pay my rent that month, because just planning ahead because it was that close. But by the skin of my teeth, I had enough to pay the rent that month. But then the next month was great, because of the way the 2 month delay. I knew that at that of payments from Amazon, I knew that I'd be okay. So that was, I mean, this is a little inside baseball, but that was that was my crazy year, and but it worked. So,
Right.
and been happy to be here ever since.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is I think that the good authors such as yourself that kind of got in it on the ground floor, around 2009, 2010, 11, and even 12.
Mhm.
I think that there was a pretty good growth rate. And
Yeah,
then now I think it's gotten to the point where
it's much harder now
I
for
think
sure.
it's become much more saturated. So now the idea is that everybody can do it. Like I
Right,
think back in 2010, people were saying nobody was saying everybody can do it.
right.
But in 2019, everybody's like, oh, anybody can do it.
Yeah,
But I think the opportunities in 2010 were probably better for somebody who who could write and was starting
definitely.
out than somebody in 2019 that has the same quality of writing because the saturation of the markets are much heavier. I think.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I'll be honest, my best years were like probably 2014, 15, and 16, or 13, 14, 15, something like that
Right.
were my best years. And even though I have even more books out now, I have to work harder to make a percentage of what I was making then. So,
Right. Yeah,
um,
I definitely feel like each year or even each month, it almost feels like I'm running faster on the treadmill
yeah,
to stay still, you know?
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's tough for me a lot of, and I hate all the other stuff I got to do. So for me, I just want to write.
Right.
And so often that's all I do, which is to my own detriment to a certain extent, but it's what makes me happy. So
Well, having a job that makes you happy, I mean, if that's I think
that's the key, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't feel like you're ever working.
No.
At the end of every one of my days, I'm like, I wish I had some more hours.
Yes. True. 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 True.
But so we were talking about the just the scale of how many authors are out there now and how many books.
Hmm.
How would you describe yourself as different than the millions of authors that are on Amazon?
Right. Well, you know what? I wouldn't even begin to know where to start. So I don't even think in those terms.
Hmm.
I just think in the terms that I'm going to write my stories, and if people like them, which they seem to, and they pass them on to others, which seems to happen, then I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
And whether I'm different or not different than other people, whether the degree or not, that's for the readers to decide. We all find those writers who's the way they tell a story hooks us and catches us and makes us come back to them again and again and again. And those same writers won't necessarily catch another reader.
Right.
And so all I can do is just write the way that I write and hope that the people who could be caught by my style do get caught and that and just keep moving on. And so differentiating between others, that just makes my head spin even trying to think about that.
Right. Well, I think that when you have a situation like writing, I think it's a lot like music,
Mm-hmm.
where somebody says, I hate country music, and then another person will say, I love country music. And that doesn't mean that the best country music artists are unbelievably talented and fantastic artists. And one person could say, oh, that's garbage. And then another person could say that, that's great. And writing is like that, in my opinion.
And also I would say that somewhat in the same way as music, authors, we really aren't, and I don't think we should look at it as uh, that we're being pitted against each other, and that
Right.
because somebody can like a dozen different authors, and
Ab-
and and that's fine. I'm not in competition with anybody else for the money. All I'm trying to do is connect with people who are going to like my stuff. And if they like your stuff better, great. They should go with the person that they like, and or maybe they'll like both of our stuff. That's fine, and then we're both winners, so to speak.
Right.
So it's not a competition. We're all in this together, and we just need to keep putting out this best stuff that we can.
Absolutely. What would you say is the most controversial book you've ever written?
Um, I mean, I don't know if any of my books are really controversial in that sense. I write thrillers and
Right.
some sci-fi and stuff. I mean, if anything is vaguely controversial, and as far as I know, there hasn't been any controversy about it. I have one book, which is probably my least read book, but is one of my favorite books, which is more. I mean, it's kind of a more of a lit book, sort of, although it has some mystery. There's a murder mystery
So
aspect
like a
to it,
literary thriller?
sort of, sort
Okay.
of. It's a love story, and it's in a very unusual setting, and it's the it's what falls it's a nice guy and a nice girl, but what falls out from the fact that they fall in love, and it's all set in the Philippines, in the go-go bars of Angeles City. And so it's got some of that in there. It's interesting. It's set around the sex trade, but there's really no sex in the novel, which maybe is not a good idea. I don't know, but it's more about relationships of the people who work there, and the people who come there, and it's one of my favorite novels, and I know people who've read it have really reacted well to it, but I
Sounds
don't know if
interesting.
it's controversy. Yeah,
So I'm assuming you've been to the Philippines.
it's called The Pull of Gravity.
Okay,
Is the name of the book.
nice. I'm assuming you've been to the Philippines.
I've been once.
Okay.
Yeah, been once.
So, like most authors, I'm assuming you do quite a bit of reading.
I
What,
do,
good.
although oddly, I don't read nearly as much as I did before I was published. I think it's because I'm spending all day reading while I'm writing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, when I wasn't published, yes, I was writing too, but I would also, I was so wanted to know what everybody else was doing and everything that I would read a lot more. But I do read a lot. I wish I'd read more. I'm actually trying to read more now again. I'm trying to pick up the pace again.
Yeah.
But I do. I love to read. I love stories. It's fun.
What genres do you like to read? Authors?
I have been. I've gone through different phases in my life, and I started off as very much a sci-fi kid and a little bit fantasy kid when I was a teen. I moved into thrillers when I was in my 20s, and a lot of like Robert Ludlum and Alistair MacLean and all that stuff, and all in kind of did that for several years. I've found myself over the last probably decade moving more and more back to science fiction for a reading pleasure, for the pleasure, because I enjoy the stories set in those worlds. It's not exclusive. I still read some thrillers now and then and everything, but more and more I'm reading a lot of sci-fi. Some of it is, it's like near future sci-fi. Some of it is like space opera, a little bit, not as much, but yeah, it captures my imagination, takes me away.
Yeah, I enjoy near future.
Yeah,
I'm not a big science fiction fan, but I like near future science fiction because it's plausible to me.
yeah, it's like Black Mirror in a book form. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I love Black Mirror. That's great. That's a
yeah,
great show.
yeah.
So, is there a specific book that you really like that you would recommend?
You know, I knew you were going to ask me that question, and I've been
I know it's a really
thinking.
hard question. There's so many
It is
good ones.
it is a tough one. One of my favorite all time books, and it's not a book for everybody, and it's a really thick book, and even now and I've read it a couple times, I still don't completely understand everything that happened in it, which maybe says more about me than anything else. Is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami, and he's like one of my favorite writers, a Japanese writer. He's the one that he wrote Norwegian Wood. There's some, the Great Sheep Chase, different things like that. But 1Q84 is my favorite. He's kind of right. All of stuff is set in present day, or sometimes they're actually set back in like the 80s and 90s. But there's a slight fantasy sci-fi twist to them occasionally, and it's all just about the characters and these weird things happening. And if you asked me to describe the book, I would.
Would it
I
be
would.
like Stranger Things at all?
It's no. Well,
No.
in a weird way, there is a certain Stranger Thing aspect
Right.
to 1Q84.
Probably more adult, I
I
would
think
assume.
about it, but it's because there's an alternate reality within it. I mean, between two different realities. But yeah, it's just one of those. He's one of those people. We were talking about hooking. He's one of those people whose style hooks me, and And just I'll read almost anything he writes. I won't always understand the story and why I don't understand it. It's just because they get in. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on, and I'm not sure I'm always picking up on everything. But I get sucked into his books and it's like I'm there. So those are the kind of writers that I love to read. So
That sounds great.
yeah.
So, Brett, thank you so much for coming on the show. Where
Oh,
can people?
happy that you had me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Where can people find out about you and your books?
Well, my website, of course, which is brettbattles.com. I'm on Twitter at Brett Battles, and Facebook, author Brett Battles is my Facebook page. And I think I author Brett Battles on Instagram too, though I'm still building that up a little bit, but nonetheless.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to another episode of Your Next Great Novel. Be sure to subscribe. You can find the podcast at philwbooks.com and on iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn.